welcome all back to another episode of the Echo from the Buttes podcast. I am your host, David Howman, joined by Tom Harden and Andrew Hazlett. And it's been a little bit of a break. We've been taking our summer break just like everyone else and, sitting back and enjoying the calm before the storm. We're getting to the start of the build-up for that storm. Tuesday and Wednesday this week were the Big 12 football media days. That's why for those watching on YouTube, you see a different background for me. I'm coming to you out of the hotel down here in Frisco, Texas, after being here boots on the ground covering ASU football and all the other 15 teams from the Big 12. And we've got some takeaways to discuss here. We've also, we're now under 2 months away from the season kicking off week 1 against Morgan State. And it doesn't really feel like we're ready for football to be coming back, but technically speaking, we are getting closer. Tom, Andrew, are you guys getting excited for it yet, or are you still enjoying your summer vacations and whatnot?
I'm back from vacation. I'm ready for football.
Yeah, I'm not going on vacation. Haven't gone on vacation. I'm ready for football. Baseball's great and all, but I want something else to supplement it right now.
Yeah. Either of you guys watching the World Cup? You've been paying attention to that?
Here and there, I've been watching games as I can.
I haven't. I've caught maybe 5 minutes total on accident. I was getting my hair cut and they were playing I forget who it was. I just remember there were the acronym for one of the teams. I was racking my brain the entire time, like I don't know what country this is. I'm not a soccer fan, never been a soccer fan. Sorry to the soccer fans out there watching and listening, but
well, it also doesn't help that there's now 48 teams in it, and you're seeing teams that haven't made it either entirely at all, or it's been 20 plus years since they've made it.
Right, and it's I don't know. In general, the whole thing. I like American football, real football, where every time that a play happens, there's 10 men slamming their heads into each other and doing irreparable harm to their bodies. That's my kind of thing. Soccer, it's like they trip over your ankle and then you put on this big acting show. It's not quite my thing, but no disrespect to the people who like it.
It's it's different strokes, and you never know.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of the World Cup too, so Arizona State, of course, when they came out to Frisco for the football media days, they brought 7 of their players. They brought the 7 that are part of the Pat Tillman Leadership Council, and as a surprise kind of reward for being voted to the Leadership Council, they came out on Monday and they actually. Kenny Dillingham and the ASU administration, they brought their players to one of the World Cup games that was happening on Monday right here in Frisco, in Dallas. And so they got to go to one of those games, and that was something that they brought up a lot throughout the interview portions. Was a lot of these guys were like, wow, I've never been to a soccer game like that. I've never seen a fan base that's as crazy and as loud as some of these soccer fans are that are traveling internationally to come here and watch these games. So they seemed really fired up about it, and they were also, a lot of them were talking about how it's got them fired up for the Union Jack Classic, which of course was a big selling point here at Media Day. Arizona State will be traveling to London to play Kansas. It's the first ever college football game being played in Wembley, and obviously, it's something that the Big 12 is very proud of. They were talking about it a lot, and the fact that they're also having TCUs playing in Ireland. They're going international. I know we've known about this game for a while, but this was when we really had a whole lot of media discussion about it and that game coming up. Are you guys excited about ASU playing international in London, or do you just think it's kind of some sort of gimmick?
I think it leverages well into the global brand that Arizona State has. It's no secret that there's a large number of alumni that do reside overseas, so this is really just leaning into being a global institution.
It's funny that you bring this up, as right now I can see British Airways playing outside my window. Uh, but regardless, I think it's both a gimmick and something to be excited about. And that, yes, it's a game in what historically has been a game played on college campuses, a game not being played there, which that's the gimmicky side. But you look at it and get to see they're bringing it to Great Britain, which doesn't host football games often, if at all, at the college level, which is different from NFL football, which I'm excited to see. What will it be like, one of those NFL games in Britain, or will it be have its own different feel? That's something that, as a comparison, that I'm interested to watch.
See, the point where it will become gimmicky for me is if it does start to morph into how the NFL handles their international schedule and goes to 4 or 5 countries every season. I like a small product with the international games. I like the novelty of it. What the NFL does, respect for building that, but there's something to be said for keeping it small and unique.
Yeah, well, and I can tell you just from the conversations that Brett Yormark was having, the Big 12 commissioner, and the way that he was pumping it up, I don't think this is going to be a one-time thing. I think this year will be I think the second time the Big 12's played in Ireland, the third time we've had a college football game of any sort in Ireland. Now they're obviously expanding into England. I think that's the plan for the Big 12 specifically, but for college football in general, is they're trying to make this more of a global thing, probably in some level of partnership with the NFL too. They're I think right now the big thing that they're looking at is, can we make it work? Because that's the biggest question right now, and something that Kenny Dillingham talked a lot about. And he even shared that Joe Connolly, their head of strength and conditioning, a couple months ago already started out building out like a travel plan for the players of what they need to do to prepare themselves for the time change, for the effects of the travel, for the diet and the nutrition aspects that go into something like that. Because with the Ireland games, those were, I believe that those were and have been and will be week 0 games. So from a scheduling standpoint, it's a little bit easier. You don't have a game right beforehand. In ASU's case, they're doing it, I believe, week 3. So they will have played already 2 games. One of them being on the road in Texas, and so that's kind of a hard travel turnaround, especially when you're talking about college kids. In the NFL, it's like, okay, well, we can leave on a Wednesday because this is literally all we do. Student athletes, ostensibly, they go to class. They got to figure out their class schedule. So there's just more things to juggle. But I think that the Big 12 right now is really curious to see how it works for both ASU and Kansas, and how they're able to handle it going forward. And all things considered, I think we're probably going to see more games in England and more games outside of the U.S. going forward.
Has anything been officially said about how the travel will be handled? Will the team be going straight to London from College Station, or will they return to Tempe for a day or two before flying to London?
I think right now the plan is to come back to Tempe, but if they have finalized any of that, it hasn't been made public yet, at least not that I've heard.
Because at least as far as I'm concerned, it would make more sense from a game preparation standpoint to go straight from College Station. Scheduling wise, like you said, with class load and everything else that's involved there, it's a little bit more logistically difficult. But in terms of on-field preparation, I think that that's probably what the team would prefer.
Yeah.
It makes sense, but also you get like, where are you practicing for that week? That's the other question.
I do think they are going to go straight to London. That's what I have heard. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I do believe they're going straight to London from College Station.
Yeah, I think if they can make that work, I think that's probably what everybody on the football team would prefer. Um, we'll find out. we will find out for sure. And in thinking about that Texas A&M game too, my favorite quote from the last couple of days, unsurprisingly, was Kenny Dillingham, and he was talking about. He was like, yeah, like the London game's hard, but also like we have to go to College Station and we got to play there. Last time we played there didn't go so well. Kenny Dillingham was still on that coaching staff for that Myles Garrett game. He clearly remembers it. He was like, we got to play there and we got to play in Lubbock. And by the way, any Sun Devil fans that are going to go to Lubbock, if you guys want to throw tortillas onto the field, if we ever get in a 3rd and 15, that'd be fine by me.
Leveraging that looming penalty, I love it.
Right, which for those who don't know, Texas Tech has a tradition of throwing tortillas. I guess technically the tradition is you throw them up in the air, but inevitably tortillas end up on the football field, and it's something they've been doing for a long time, I guess. And 1 year ago, the Big 12 officially banned it.
I think it was going into last season.
Yeah, and they banned tortillas being thrown. If they get on the field, it's a 15-yard penalty on Texas Tech. And Texas Tech fans are still pretty upset about it. Texas Tech fans are upset about a lot right now, which that's another thing that we got to discuss is the Brendan Sorsby saga, the quarterback that transferred from Cincinnati to Texas Tech for a whole boatload of money this offseason, and then has a gambling problem. And he's bet a lot of money on his own team, on his own games, and there was a whole week's worth of drama where the NCAA they indefinitely banned him, and then a Lubbock judge said that he could play, and Texas Tech was going to sue the NCAA, and then eventually Brendan Sorsby, gave up because he realized he doesn't have much of a legal fight here. So basically what happens is Brendan Sorsby is not going to play this year. He's not going to get to go to the NFL until the 2027 NFL draft. And it's thrown a wrench into everything for Texas Tech, who thought that they got one of the top transfer QBs this offseason. So before we get into what was said about Brendan Sorsby at Media Day, I just want to talk to you guys about the whole Sorsby saga, because I know we were going to try and do an episode talking about it back when it was all fresh, but things were happening so quickly. Every single day there was a new development. What is your guys' main takeaway from that?
I think the end result was correct. Like, he shouldn't be able to play. You look across every single sport, you get banned for life for betting in games where you compete in. That should be the punishment. This isn't a gray. This isn't a black and white. I wish obviously there's going to be investigations into stuff with Cincinnati if there hasn't been already. I don't know the full scope on that timeline, but that's probably going to have some detail to that we don't know at this point. And like if with Texas Tech's case, it came out that they knew about the gambling to an extent. The rules are the rules. You'd be breaking those rules, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it's funny you mention investigations into Cincinnati. The NCAA actually did issue a formal letter of inquiry today to Cincinnati, claiming that the athletic department knew about the gambling going on and covered it up for the 2 years while he was there.
Yeah, and like you said, that came out today being Wednesday, and it was great timing because Scott Satterfield, the Cincinnati head coach, he had his his media availability today, and so maybe 2-3 hours after that was announced is when he comes out onto the stage for his Q&A. And honestly, it took a while before anybody asked about it. I assume that some of the people in the attendance that were asking questions just hadn't seen it yet, but I just kept waiting for it. And then somebody asked can you give any comment on that? And Satterfield immediately all he said was, yeah, we can't comment on that at this time, and then just left it at that. And
do you think it's more people just hadn't seen it yet, or people taking cues from Commissioner Yormark's comments yesterday, saying that it was too early to comment on the Sorsby situation?
Yeah, well, so to that point, for those who didn't watch the live stream of it all, which I don't blame you. There's it's not always the most entertaining thing, but on Tuesday, the first day starts off. Commissioner Yormark gets up and basically gives his state of the conference speech. Highlights are the Big 12 is doing great, and there's nothing that they're doing wrong, and also, they signed an entitlement deal with Monster Energy, so the Monster Energy logo is going to be on every single thing for football and basketball this season, so get ready for that. But then he opens it up to the Q&A, and the very first question is Brendan Sorsby. and it basically was just like, what support, if any, did you give to Texas Tech, and at what point did you take away that support? This is a very, very well-worded question, very safe, and Yormark gave exactly the kind of response I would have expected, not one that I liked, but basically just said, now's not the time for that. We're here to talk about these football teams, and I don't want to get bogged down with any of that. Now's not the time. And then everybody else goes on to ask their questions, and at one point, another guy gets up, and he's like in the front row, and he asks, first of all, he's sitting down, and they tell you specifically, like, stand up when you get the mic, introduce yourself, blah, blah, blah. This guy's sitting down and asks this question. He's basically like, well, you guys banned tortillas for Tech fans. And but OSU, Oklahoma State, they're still allowed to bring in oars and bang them on the walls to make noise. They get an exception for that. And his actual question was, he was like, you're talking about, the Big 12 is going to be more than just 12. We're greater than 12, but why should Texas Tech fans believe you, is exactly how he phrased it. And Yormark this whole time was standing at his podium, and then he starts walking over towards the guy on the stage, and he says, I want you to stand up and ask me that question again. Right in front of me, and then I'll give you the answer I want to give you. and so this guy stands up and asks word for word the same exact question, and then Yormark goes, well, actually, that's not right. You're misquoting me. I said we're 16 strong, and that's my answer for you. And so he didn't even answer the question or anything, but it was definitely a tense exchange, and there, I think the overwhelming feeling of a lot of other people that were in attendance was a mix of like, that wasn't exactly the best look for Yormark, and also he didn't even come close to answering the question, but also like, can we just move on? Like nobody but the tech media there agrees with what this guy was going on about. Like, they're not going to talk about Brendan Sorsby. Let's talk about something else.
And from the sound of it, not even really a question that he should be answering or whatever. Like, it just very, very poorly structured all around, and just kind of like throwing stuff out there, hoping something sticks.
Right. Very, very clearly trying to start something. like basically saying Texas Tech fans feel like we've been cheated, even though we were defending somebody who was cheating. And like, we want our tortillas back.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, to me, this questionable to answer was it's you play stupid games, you get stupid prizes. Look, simple as that. And you can eat your tortillas. They're tasty. They're good. I like having tacos. Don't just chuck them in the air.
Yeah, it's a waste of tortilla.
Exactly. What did the tortilla ever do to deserve that?
Now, the important question before we get back into the Sorsby stuff is corn or flour.
Depends on the situation. For like for street tacos, corn tortillas. For quesadillas, flour.
Expand.
Uh, I mean, flour tortillas are just bigger. I like more cheese on my quesadilla, and then I like the understated almost crunch that comes with a corn tortilla for like especially when you're having a soft street taco. So it's just a little more little better texture.
I largely agree with Tom. If I had to keep one, get rid of the other forever, I'm keeping flour. I just like the bigness of them personally. Like the flavor, or like to me, it's like there's trade offs, but at the end of the day, I just like bigger tacos personally.
I mean, neither one really has a flavor by themselves either. It's all
Yeah,
about what you put in them. So I'm not out here eating tortillas just plain, but for depending on whether I'm eating a taco or a quesadilla, like that'll determine which tortilla I go with.
I can't relate. I eat tortillas by themselves as I'm making the things that are going to go in the tortilla later.
Well, you also don't like stuffing, so we already know you're weird.
You know, there's moving past that. There's a restaurant. I'm pretty sure it's still there in Chandler, right across from Chandler High, called Elmer's. Elmer's Taco Shop, and anybody listening that went to Chandler High, they know. Amazing place, but there's one thing that they do there. Literally, you get a corn tortilla and they just slather it up in butter and roll it up. And at least when I was there, it was only $1, and so I would get like 3 of those and just eat that, and that was my lunch, and it was amazing and it was great. So corn tortillas all the way. The only time I will use flour tortillas, it's purely a utility because I need something, as Andrew said, with bigness, and and it's just to have the size. Like if I'm making like a big burrito, um, but corn's the way to go. If I have a choice, I'm going corn tortilla every time.
Well, you will be happy to know that Elmer's is still in operation.
That's good. I not the last time I was there, but the time before that, I drove through Chandler and I specifically drove down that street to make sure that it is still there, and I was very happy to see them still open. Um, but back to the Brendan Sorsby thing.
Now you got me thinking about tacos.
Yeah, um, but and so there was all the drama with Yormark, which I really had an issue with Brett Yormark saying like now's not the time to discuss it. Um, and it's not necessarily that I'm surprised he didn't want to talk about it because obviously Sorsby's not on the Texas Tech roster. He's not going to play for them. He's not going to play for any Big 12 team. Uh, Yormark definitely wants to move beyond it. Um, but also to say like now's not the time, when is the time? I mean, it's literally a 2-day event where you gather every member of the Big 12 together to talk about business relating to the Big 12. I mean, they had a 15-minute presentation on Monster Energy, and you're telling me now's not the time to talk about one of your most high profile could have been players that is ineligible to play his last year of eligibility now because he was sports gambling? Like, if now's not the time, when is there going to be a time to discuss it?
I think it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation because it's still an active investigation. But at the same time, like you said, this is a very high profile story. it's something that's going to be in headlines for weeks, months, if not, all the way up until the NFL draft. So it's something that has to be addressed sooner than later. I think that maybe a better way to phrase it could have been, um, we won't publicly comment until investigations are further along in the process, or something to that effect. But simply the cut and dry, now's not the time, does leave me a little bit shortchanged. I respect that, not commenting on it as it's being investigated, but I think there's got to be some kind of timeline as far as when we can expect to be able to speak about it more.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously with the investigation and stuff, and especially the stuff with Cincinnati, there there's going to be more that we'll find out and that will be talked about, and that'll be interesting to keep track of. Um, Notably, when Joey McGuire, the Texas Tech head coach, got up for his media availability. And I gotta be honest, I really do like Joey McGuire. He's just a funny dude. He's like the most stereotypical Texas football coach you can think of. He comes out, he sits down at the podium, and he goes to do his opening statement. And the first thing he says is, "I know nobody's gonna believe me, but I'm actually fired up to be here." And it had me laughing for a good bit. And he even somebody asked him about the his reaction going through the whole thing, and he didn't really comment so much on the Sorsby situation itself, but he basically just said he was like yeah, it was different for me than it was for the university president or AD, because I had a bunch of coaches reaching out to me and asking like, how are you holding up? Like, this is a really weird situation to be going through, whereas the president and the AD were just getting attacked, which, to be fair, they put out a 40-minute video on Twitter explaining why they're digging in their heels on this. So they kind of asked for it. and but that was really as much as McGuire said, and then everything after that was talking about Will Hammond, their quarterback that's now going to be the starter, who was the backup last year, had a few starts, notably lost to Arizona State. And McGuire even said, he's like, if you ask him, and like in his mind, he's been the starter this whole time, so nothing's changed for him. Which, I mean, we'll see how that actually plays out. He couldn't beat ASU last year. We'll see what he can do this year. But for the most part, McGuire kind of sidestepped it. But I think he's very much ready to just put it all behind him and move on and focus on football. And I don't think that he's I don't know where he really felt on Texas Tech's strategy with Sorsby, but either way, he's just ready to move forward like any coach would be.
And you brought up the point about Will Hammond that I was about to make, and that his mentality is just as important as Joey McGuire's, and he's not taking this, at least outwardly, he's not taking this as, oh, I'm thrust into the situation. He's saying, I was already here. This is my job.
Yeah, and that's I think, like, through the whole ordeal, when it was still ongoing, in my head I was like, one, they can't keep Sorsby and they can't play Sorsby because the damage that's going to do to the sport, but also just like that locker room, like every single week when players are made available, that's going to be a question, and you can't subject your players to that. Obviously, it's still going to be a question to some degree, but if Will Hammond gets in there and he looks good and they keep winning, people are going to stop asking about it. They're going to start asking about, hey, how'd you play so good? How'd you win, right? And so, I obviously it does, not having Brendan Sorsby changes Texas Tech's status as the unquestioned front runner to win the Big 12, but I don't think that it's going to be quite the blow that people initially thought, just because they already have a guy with experience and with confidence that's there and ready to go.
Yeah, he's been in that system. He knows what the key to success there is, and he's well positioned to well positioned to have another great season for the Raiders.
Yeah, and as far as Arizona State goes, we don't know who their quarterback's going to be yet, and that was something Kenny Dillingham spoke about at the media day. That we have an article up on EchoFromTheButtes.com that you can read as well that details it. Obviously, they brought in 2 transfer quarterbacks in Cutter Boley from Kentucky and Mikey Keene, technically from Oregon, but from Michigan, but he never played for them. I know him as the Fresno State quarterback that dominated the Sun Devils in Kenny's first year, and also went to Chandler High. I bet he knows about Elmer's Tacos.
Most likely.
But like it's pretty much an open competition between those 2 guys, and Kenny basically just said, I'm comfortable waiting up until the last week, like the week before the season starts, to name a starter. And whenever one of them establishes themselves as the starter, like, players will know before it's necessarily announced to the public. But as of right now, it doesn't sound like either one has necessarily pulled away. Does that make you concerned at this point in the season?
No, this isn't without precedent, because if you go back 2 years, Sam Levitt wasn't named starting quarterback until the week of the first game. This is honestly something that I expected with 2 new transfers coming in, plus Jake Fetty still looking to establish himself as an incoming freshman. I think that Camp T next month will tell a lot of the story as to who has the inside track. But I'm not at all surprised, not at all worried that we may not have a starting quarterback named until the week leading up to the opener against Morgan State.
If you had to guess, though, guessing today, who's your guess?
I think Cutter Boley's the favorite in the clubhouse right now, but a lot can change in the next month, and Camp T is going to be that high watermark. That's 3 years ago we thought that that's where we really saw the emergence of, wasn't it? Why am I drawing a blank on who started in 2023 was? David, you'll have to fact check me on that.
There were a few in 2023, but Jaden Rashada, I think, is who you're talking about.
Yes, Jaden Rashada kind of wasn't on a lot of radars, but impressed. And for as much as the Sun Devils struggled in 2023, still played well enough. And then obviously, like I mentioned, with Sam Levitt going into 2024. But to wrap this all up with a bow, for my money, I would say Cutter Boley would be the week 1 starter if we had to name that starter right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think this feels very, very similar to 2 years ago when Levitt was ultimately named the starter, because it was Sam Levitt and it was Jeff Sims. And so, obviously with Sam Levitt, you've got a young player who was a 4-star recruit, went somewhere else, and has some raw abilities, but it hasn't really shown that he can be a high-level starter yet. And then you've got somebody in Jeff Sims who has been a starter, has been at bigger programs, but like nobody's throwing NIL money at him. All due respect to Jeff Sims, nobody after his stints at Georgia Tech and Nebraska, nobody really wanted him as their for-sure starter. He's had an immense value as a backup because of his experience, but there were a lot of things that you had to kind of clean up. Mikey Keene is not the same. In a lot of ways, he's very much the opposite. He's, physically a little bit limited compared to Jeff Sims, but also is kind of the ideal bus driver type quarterback. Like, your offense is never going to crumble because of him, but you're also probably not getting some of those highlight plays that Sam Levitt had, for example, that Cutter Boley had at Kentucky. Whereas Cutter Boley's big issue at Kentucky was in 2 years of starting and playing as a backup, he had one fewer interception than he had touchdowns. Like the potential for great plays is very great with him, but the potential for like doing the surrender cobra and like, oh my God, what happened? It's also pretty high. And so the challenge with Boley is getting him to play a little less erratic, play within the confines of the structure of the offense. And if they can get him to that point, I think he has the raw tools to where like you're going to go with Cutter Boley because the potential when everything's clicking is greater than the potential if everything's clicking with Mikey Keene. Whereas, like if we get to Camp T and Cutter Boley just still like if he's still making mistakes, if he's throwing it in the dirt, he's throwing picks. They know that they can go with Mikey Keene and they're going to be competitive in the Big 12. They're going to be able to put up some numbers, especially with these receivers that they brought in. But it may not. Mikey Keene probably isn't taking them back to the college football playoff.
And I'm curious to see as well, like just how much the the playbook may be tweaked to give opportunity to each quarterback at their strengths.
Yeah, it's something I'm interested in too, as I do think Boley will be the week one starter for the Sun Devils. I from what I've seen in spring camp, albeit very limited, Boley seemed like the better quarterback at this point in time.
Yeah, he's definitely the obviously raw just in terms of his experience compared to Keene, but I think you get him with somebody like Kenny Dillingham who has such a good track record with quarterbacks. It makes sense, and of course, either one of these guys is going to look good in this offense with, as I mentioned, these receivers, Omarion Miller, Reed Harris, Raiden Vinesbright. Kenny Dillingham even talked up both Miller and Harris as guys that if they play up to their potential, have the talent to become first round picks in the draft. Of course, that was also a topic of conversation after ASU had, for the first time since 2001, multiple first round draft picks. And now all these players on the roster right now, they're licking their chops and they're saying, man, I'm going to get to the NFL now. Like the NFL now knows that they got to look at ASU for talent. And Miller and Harris are two guys that Kenny Dillingham said have first round talent. CJ Fight was another guy he said that has that potential. He probably just needs to kind of fill up the box score a little bit more than he has the last couple of years. But he has the potential. He has kind of the right size requirements that NFL teams look for in defensive tackles in the first round. So it's kind of an interesting. It was an interesting vibe from the team this year because last year they were coming off the Big 12 championship, the playoff appearance, and all of the conversation was around. You've got all these returning starters from last year's team. How do you stay on target? How do you get back to the playoff? And this year it's more like, well, last year didn't live up to our standards, but we also saw like our talent development works. We're bringing in guys that have great talent. It's just a matter of like, can we play with that chip on our shoulder and finish these games and surprise some people?
You also mentioned Omarion Miller and CJ Fight. It's worth noting that they were both named preseason All Big 12, so the hype is definitely there. It's we'll wait to see how it plays out on the field, but it's definitely good accolades for those two guys and bodes well for their prospects for the future.
Miller in particular was the guy that stood out for me in spring ball, and the way his game is, it made me go, huh. Kind of reminds me of Jordan Tyson a little bit. So I'm not saying he'll be a Tyson 2.0, but potentially could.
Well, and they both came to Arizona State from Colorado.
Not a bad
That is
pipeline.
true.
Not a bad pipeline, which By the way, there was also, speaking of Colorado, there was also a soundbite that came out about them from Media Day where one of the players, because they got a new offensive coordinator this year, and one of the players was asked about how's it different, and he gave a very candid response and basically said, well, the biggest difference is like we're actually watching film now. Like last year, we wouldn't watch film, we didn't watch defense, we just kind of went out and did like high school free ball. And
Well, they kind of played like it too.
I mean, yeah, it definitely, you hear that and you watch their film from last year and you're just like, yeah, I see it. But it's a shocking admission to make in public at a media event when there's cameras in your face. So nothing quite that incendiary that came from ASU players, but I do want to pivot to talking about baseball before we wrap up because Sun Devil baseball, obviously they had a reasonably solid year, got back to the tournament, didn't go as far as our expectations were, but now they're in the off season and their roster has been churning. The transfer portal was open, is now no longer open, but there's been a lot of change. Andrew, Tom, you guys want to walk us through that?
Yeah, I can
Andrew, I'll
start
let
us
you take
off.
the lead on that one.
Yeah, I can start us off here. You look at the portal departures. That's how I want to start this. There's a couple of your supplementary offensive pieces who went into the portal. Garrett Michelle, who was a frequent starter by the end of the year, kind of lost his starts. They didn't come as often as we saw in the beginning of the year. Beck Zavorik, when he played, kind of the opposite. He started a little bit in the beginning. When New Contradas went down with the leg injury, he played the majority of time at second base. Struggled, got benched for a few starts. We saw Finn Leach, a freshman, play a few of those games. Zavorik worked his way back into the starting role. And when Contradas came back, Zavorik still did play. Crossed the diamond a little bit in a couple different roles, and he was a fairly good piece as well. And then you have Cohen Nikolai, who left the secondary catcher, who, like Michelle at the end of the year, saw his role get smaller and smaller with Brody Briggs taking it over. Uh, and then the fourth sizable piece in the portal was Kai McGarry, a guy who was picked in the draft of 2023, no 2024 by the Astros, and opted to not sign with them. Come play at Arizona State. There was didn't quite perform to that level, but he's played well. Speedy guy. I liked his bat. All four of those guys, I liked their bats. I didn't necessarily love their bats, but they were playable starters that you'd have. Those four guys are gone offensively. You're gonna have to bring in new depth, and the Sun Devils have done that. On the pitching side, you saw a few names hop into the portal like Finn Edwards, but guys who weren't starters last season, guys who weren't your big bullpen guys like your Taylor Penns, your Derek Schaefer's, you kept those guys. Like pitching, the retention rate is good, and they've brought in a few new guys. But what are your two big takeaways on outbound players?
I think for me, it's like you said, it's losing the depth, and it really makes the catcher position weaker on the whole. No disrespect to Brody Briggs, he did, he performed, moderately well throughout the season, but you're losing that depth at an important position when you lose Colin Nikolai, and then not to mention other depth catching in Cooper Clauser, who saw some action in midweek games or would come in as a late inning pinch hit replacement in games that were getting out of hand. You know, it's catcher's already a wear and tear position as it is, and it concerns me just seeing that much depth go at a very important position.
Well, the good news for you, Tom, is that the Sun Devils have stocked back up in the catcher position. They've got one incoming freshman whose name I can't think of off the top of my head, but he is. All the incoming freshmen are in my portal tracker, which you can find at echofromthebeats.com, which needs some updates, but that's fine. Uh, but regardless from that, you brought in pair catchers from the portal out of Moorhead State, Caden Sheraton, a big bopper thumper bat who can hit for home runs, hit for power, and then you brought in a JUCO kid down the road from Chandler Gilbert Community College who had a great freshman year there, and a local kid from Levine as well. Bringing guys in to fill that depth in the catcher position is something the Sun Devils needed to go get with losses to Nikolai Klauser and Tommy Brown, and then across the board they brought in a couple infielders, Marcos Rosales, who could be a starter at second base next year, considering that New Contradas is likely going to be drafted, I would imagine, but hard to tell if he'll sign or not. That there's always some surprises. There's no guarantee if they sign or not. And then in the outfielder, the biggest fish they've got so far out of Washington, Jackson Hotchkiss, 20 homers last season at Washington. We've seen guys come in from the portal to Arizona State, and their power grows. 20 homers last season is pretty good. Put him with Landon Harrison, who had 28 last year. That's scary.
That's a very formidable part of the order right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I expect to get to see some more names in the portal added at this point, just because still stuff happening for I would say good 2 weeks. I would say maybe more. But yeah, and then you brought in a bunch of pitchers as well. Alex Valentine, I believe how it's pronounced, the lefty out of South Carolina is the guy I have kind of circled as a guy who he's been a starter at points, he's been a reliever at points. I think he's your next Sean Fitzpatrick. We saw how great Sean Fitzpatrick was last season. I think he's that next guy to take that step up and be that lefty out of the pen that you want. And then one other guy that is really interesting is the West Virginia transfer, Chase Meyer, I believe, who was a preseason All Big 12 team, had an injury in the offseason, which interestingly enough, it was disputed by the coach and player when it happened. That set him back in his ramp up. They were going to make him their Friday guy, yeah, but he was in the bullpen to start out and was dismissed from the team after a reported confrontation between Coach Steve Sabins and him. Regardless of that, his potential is high, but we'll see what will happen with him. He's pitching in one of the summer leagues. I don't remember which one. There's so many, but that's a name that you have to circle as well.
I don't think I saw him on the Cape, but I didn't get to see all 10 teams when I was out there. But the other pitcher coming in that I'm keenly interested in is Johnny Stacy, coming out of D2 San Angelo. He's had an injury the last couple of seasons, but 3.13 career ERA at San Angelo. I'm interested to see how how he fits into the pitching room here.
Yeah, there's been, I think, comparative to other seasons, there's been a lot of JUCO transfers and D2 transfers, uh, which you look at West Virginia, Kansas, that's how they like to craft their teams. West Virginia and Kansas, past few years, have been two of the best teams in the new Big 12 baseball conference. That might be how you should construct your teams moving forward. Uh, but so you got to copy it to the best of your ability. And Arizona State has got those guys, which I think is huge for the program. Is guys who want it and coming from your junior colleges. Those are guys who want it. Those are guys that are hungry. They haven't had the chance at the D1 level.
Yeah, well, and I think the biggest news for Sun Devil baseball, obviously, there's been a lot of players leaving through the portal, coming in via the portal, but the biggest one was obviously Landon Hairston not going anywhere.
Absolutely. Keeping Harrison was your number one priority in the offseason. Simple as that. You couldn't let him walk. And to me, he's from just down the road and in the East Valley. I don't think he was ever going to leave. I think I think he wanted to stay a Sun Devil because that's the school he grew up watching just down the road from. Has his parents, has his family, they extended family. They can come out whenever they want. If you go to an SEC school like Georgia, that's a lot harder to do.
And it also didn't hurt that Adidas stepped in with some of the financial package to keep him here either.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it's again, it goes back to the work that the ASU athletics department as a whole is doing. We've seen increases in support, financial support, for obviously for football, for baseball. They're working on their renovations of the basketball arena as well. Obviously, using Adidas, leveraging that partnership there in this case was a huge win because Andrew, like you said, local kid, grew up down the street, Golden Spikes finalist. Like, you can't lose a guy like that. Like, that would have been not as catastrophic, but similar in terms of awful vibes to when we were talking about Michigan coming after Kenny Dillingham. Like, you can't lose Kenny Dillingham to Michigan. You can't lose Landon Hairston to the SEC or wherever. Local guys like that turn out to be superstars, you have to keep them local. So to be able to keep Landon Hairston just for the vibes is phenomenal, but obviously for what he actually brings as a player is also incredible because now you know exactly who your best player is, who your best hitter is. To be able to bring him back, it not only helps your roster, but it sends a message of, yeah, we get to keep our best players. Like, we're Arizona State baseball. Like, this is just what we do. We bring in good players and they stay here.
Absolutely.
Yep, 100% agree.
That's why you see guys, you look at the guys in the portal and you see where their destinations are. Most of the time, if not all the time, they're the schools who respectfully aren't as good at baseball as Arizona State. You see most of these freshmen who didn't get the chance to play go to a mid-major or low-major school, and I do think some of those guys will flourish at those schools, but they didn't have the chance to at Arizona State because the roster depth is something there, and I just having depth for the program it is huge, and I'm curious how Arizona State is going to continue to rebuild that depth in the portal because I don't think they're done yet at this time.
By the way, Andrew, you were speaking of the depth. You were talking about the incoming freshman catcher. I think that is Jackson Weber, according to your tracker.
That sounds right. The freshman that I have the freshman that I have circled is Jet Berry, the shortstop coming out of uh, Queen Creek High School, I believe. Potentially an MLB draft pick. We'll see if he signs. We'll see if he doesn't sign. If the Sun Devils can get him to campus, I think he is a freshman you have to have circled, as this guy could be the next Landon Hairston. Coming from Queen Creek area, like Hairston did, local kid. You might have your next Landon Hairston.
High praise.
I mean, he's got he's got a great frame for a shortstop, 5'10", about 175, and he's got what it takes as far from the little bit of him that I've seen. It's just a matter of getting him to campus, and we know just how difficult that can be with some of the all commits that Arizona State has had in the past.
Yeah, well, and Andrew, like you said, there's still things going on with this roster too. They're still adding. They're still figuring some things out, and that's one of the beauties of having a portal tracker, which you can find again at echofromthebuttes.com. Like Andrew said, it's going to be updated, so check back in there to see those updates. And of course, we're going to have ongoing coverage of all things Arizona State athletics going forward. We're like I said, we're all it's summertime. It's hot out. We're tired. We may not be coming back next week with a new episode, but we will be back, especially as we get a little bit closer to football season coming back. Lots to discuss, lots to break down. So until next time at Echo from the Buttes, for Andrew Hazlett, for Tom Harden, I'm David Howman signing off. As always, give 'em hell, Devils.